Hey, 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 everybody. How are you doing? It is Friday. We have a little yellow live thing in the corner, which means we are go. Happy Friday, everybody. It is July 10th. Welcome to My Community Manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. My name is Dom. So glad to have you here. We have a fantastic panel set up for you guys, all about building community from scratch. Real quick, just wanted to say hey to everybody hanging out over on the Twitter side, the hashtag CMGR Hangout. So glad that you guys are there. Thanks to, I believe we have Carrie hanging out over there. I'm getting thrown shade right now that I sound a whole lot like Brew, which actually isn't shade. It's a great honor to sound like him. As you notice, he's not here, but we do have an awesome panel. We're going to be talking about building, like I said, building a community from scratch. So, you know, this is actually a topic that we had back at CMAD 2014, if you can remember, way back then. It's no uncommon task for community builders, especially in our current age of startups, you know, to have to build a community from nothing. So, you know, where do we begin? What do we have to take into account? How do you find those first community members when you may not even have a production ready or a product or a service or anything? So I'm going to step out of the way here and let the panel introduce themselves. So why don't we go ahead and get started with Sean.
Morning, everybody. I'm Sean. I'm the Director of Support for Place, formerly Backplane. And what we do is we're a platform that lets people connect with other people who are just as passionate about the same thing that they are. We have a tool that lets people launch and build their own social networks. And as of date, we have up to around 5,000 communities live. And I'm in charge of making sure that all those people are successful in their community building endeavors.
Hey everyone, my name is Katie Bappel. I'm the Senior Manager of Online Community Strategy and Services at Socia Software. We're an online community platform.
Hey, I'm David Dewald, Community Manager for Bit9 Carbon Black, and we are a endpoint security company.
Okay, I will go this time. So my name is Charlotte Kubler. I'm based out of London, representing the UK, EMEA here. So I work for a company called Lithium Technologies. I'm a senior consultant in community and customer experience. I've been working in community for about 10 years, and basically I help clients that decide to go with Lithium to help them build their communities and make sure that their communities are successful. Hopefully I help them with that.
Hi, I'm Kristen Cardos. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. I do a lot of different things, but most relevant to this discussion is probably that I'm the community manager for Social Business Hour. Glad to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Sherry Reddy, and I'm the community manager for Magento, which is an open source e-commerce platform, as well as co-produce CMGR Hangout in my CMGR here with Dom and Brew.
Awesome. And I am Dom. I am a community manager for BTC Revolutions and a co-producer here with Brew and Sherry. Brew, as you guys see, is not here. He's actually rocking out with some meetings somewhere in the United States. So he sends his love. But let's go ahead and jump right into the first question. So we're getting started, building that community. What are some of the first steps you should take when you're building a community from scratch? Ready, go.
I'll field it. I think the first thing that you should do, well, a couple of first steps. So with any community that we're launching, we have a couple things that I'll always ask the organizers before they even get going. One is exactly what do you want this to be about? I mean, starting with the why obviously is the biggest point to I guess getting going, because obviously that's going to be the first thing that people are asking. The next thing is going to be, I guess, kind of the best way to start a community from scratch is to not, I guess, is sort of the cheater way to answer that question, which is to find other people who either have some interest in that community, who already have an audience built in, who have some distribution network built in, who work with our content creators themselves, who work with other great content creators. But I think starting with the why, of course, and then also finding people who can help, I think is the easiest, or is the best step to get going. Because I mean, I would always, one of the other points that I always bring out is that your first 10 are the hardest. And once you have your first 10, once you have the people who are willing to like help you out, who can design creative assets, who can do whatever else, that makes things markedly easier. So I guess kind of my answer to what's the best way to start a community from scratch is to not start one from scratch, and is to start it as sort of a network that you're bringing together other people who also want to do the same thing.
I actually have to agree with Sean on that quite a lot. I've had the occasion of being with quite a few customers that decide, hey, we're going to do a community. And it's a case of understanding why they want to do it. And the most important part there is defining the business objective. Why is the business, well, especially for enterprise communities, why is a community important for your company? Are you trying to reduce customer support costs, which for the case of Lithium is a lot the case of our clients? Is it for marketing? Is it for engagement? Why are you doing it? Once you've got that defined, is also defining your audience. Who you're trying to reach out to. Are you reaching out to your customers? Are you reaching out to prospects? Are you reaching out to super techies? Are you reaching out to, you know, what's the audience of your business objective? So I think that's the best way of starting off. Once you've kind of defined both of those areas, it's actually much easier to build on and build your strategy around.
Yeah, I think Charlotte nails it on the head. I think the first step is really assessing the feasibility. So figuring out, I think that online communities have prerequisites. So it's not, you know, starting to build a community, it's seeing if communities a fit. And part of that, like Charlotte said, I think is going out and figuring out what your proof of concept is. So who is your audience? Are they people who build robots in China, or are they, you know, mothers of children with learning disabilities? Figuring out exactly what that niche is, talking to those people, seeing if they have the inclination towards social technologies, and figuring out what their objectives with this kind of concept will be. And then also another requisite, figuring out what the executive buy-in looks like. So internally, what are the objectives? Is it aligned with this kind of concept? How does that overlap with what you learned about your audience? Also figure out market share. So if you want to create a community, but there are 5 other people already doing it, do I really have the adoption rates that I think I'll need in order to fund this? And then bandwidth, of course. So do you have the people to manage it and figure out that this could be a successful solution because we're going to put into it what it takes to build a community?
Please don't go there if you don't have the resources. It's just like the worst thing you could ever do. It's just an opportunity of falling flat on your face and looking stupid. So do it if you've got the time, if you've got the resource and the backup, definitely.
That's a good point. And you have to keep in mind what's sustainable over a longer period too. That's where I think a lot of times things can go sideways, as you start out full of enthusiasm and maybe even resources, and then as time goes on, that's where things can get a little tricky.
Well, I think one of the other points that gets brought up a lot, at least in some of our discussions, is to Sean's point, is what is the purpose of this? It's like, what are you trying to do? And I think community gets thrown around a lot as like this awesome thing that everybody should have, but more often than not, like in some, especially for the enterprise side, a community is not really what the desired outcome is. It's either a following or a lower burden of support, and neither of those things are what a community is for, right? A community is not for, in and of itself, just making support costs lower. Like that's not exactly what they're for. There's a lot more to them, and if that's really what you want to invest in, then that's awesome, and that's super exciting. But it's to everybody's sort of point, like that's something that you really need to be clear about. Is like, is this really what we want to do? And if it is, awesome, then double down on it.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's who's your audience and why would they come to your community? What would be their purpose being there? You all said it so good. That's all I got.
Well, just so everybody out there in the interweb lands knows, nobody really wants to speak after David just because of how perfect his voice is. So even though he said literally a half a sentence, I'll just jump in and take one for the team and move us along to question 2, which we already started to really jump in. And by the way, if we have a couple of questions already rolled in, if you guys are over there on Twitter, you have any questions. I know this panel is definitely going to be really good for answering quick questions that you guys have on this. So make sure to use the hashtag and tag my CMGR. But going into question 2, we started to touch on this a little bit. I heard Katie do it for sure. How can you find community members before you have a product or a service? Like what you said, find that first 10. Where do you really go to look for those people? If you guys want to dig into that.
Can I start off with that one? Yeah, okay.
Please do. Please do.
So this is between only us, right? It's a secret. So I actually started off working community management by managing a fan club of a metal band when I was a teenager. And the band was a Dutch band. I'll tell you afterwards which band it is. So, and the case of, obviously, in France, nobody knew very much about the band. So I basically went on the forums of other similar bands and, just reach out to the people and say, listen, really passionate about them. I think they're really worth listening into. And that's basically how we kind of helped the band grow in notoriety within different other fandoms, and people getting excited about it. So that was one of the steps. And once the kind of band I worked for managed to get that kind of notoriety, one of the jobs as being in the fan club that I did was promote those younger bands. So we kind of, kept the virtuous circle of I kind of piggybacked on those popular people, and then I helped younger bands kind of promote through what we built with the band at the time. For people who are asking, it's a Dutch female-fronted metal band called Epica. If you're in the genre, I would recommend listening to it.
If you're not in the genre, I recommend you listen to it as well.
Yeah, the singer's pretty hot, actually.
I would say that, honestly, whatever the product is, that you have fans out there already. And it's just a matter of finding them and convincing them that they can do amazing things with you and help you to build a community. So every product has a fan. I don't care what it is. Somebody loves it somewhere outside of your company. And you just got to find that person and say, hey, how would you like to be a part of something that can be bigger and grow it and help us expand it. Now, just know that, if there's 100 of them out there, only one of them is probably going to end up helping you. 10 of them will say they will, but only one of them will. And it's going to take time to find those peoples, those champions. And you can also start internally, too. You've got to find internal teams and people that are willing to go the extra mile in a new community. Because at first, the content's mostly going to come from in-house. So internal champions, and then find your external fans and pull them in together and talk and figure out how you want to do things and what's the best way to move forward.
Yeah, David, as usual, said what I was going to say, only better. But no, one thing that I was going to say was that for a lot of things, since communities are around a common interest anyway, chances are excellent that some of the people that you're close to in your day-to-day, or whether it's online or your family or friends or whatever, you probably already have your first 5 right there. And then from there you can go out and start doing some of that listening and research to find more people.
Yeah, I think if you already have, obviously if you're already a company and you're using this for higher engagement or for a different marketing tactic, you already have some distribution lists built in where you can go and reach out to those people and figure out what the value propositions are for them to come and use this new concept. I actually come from a strong community as a product background, meaning that there wasn't any product or service or distribution list to reach out to people on. So it involved a lot of stalking and Google wizardry, basically, finding people in other social spaces and reaching out to them, looking at a lot of Twitter lists, looking at people on LinkedIn, reaching out, a lot of direct outreach, creating spreadsheets, having, a list of X number of people to reach out to every week and directly invite. So a lot of micro level tasks, because when you are starting out building a new community from scratch, it's a lot of very small little tasks where you have to do that direct member acquisition strategy.
I think one of the other things that, like, what we get this question from a lot of different verticals, and I mean, one of the biggest questions is like, it's okay. Well, if I don't have a distribution list, where do I start? And one of the things that I always sort of point out to people is like, look for the channels with which you wouldn't normally think that people would interact with you. So like, if you're a retailer, I would look at who are people who have bought from you frequently, and then just reach out proactively. Hey, here's a thing that we're working on. What do you think about it? Does that sound interesting? Because that person has already shown, I mean, albeit in a passive manner, but they've already shown that they're really dedicated to whatever it is that you sell. If you're obviously, all of the social listening ideas work really well if you've launched a product and if you've just done a Kickstarter and you have a splash page up. This sort of goes to, I don't know if we've actually asked the question yet, but the question of, well, what about if you're a product that hasn't launched yet? Which is, if people were talking about you, whether or not it's in like a formal channel or whatever else, reach out to those people and ask them for help. Ask them for their. I mean, one of the other points that I think people skip over is like, just ask them for their emails. Reach out and ask people for a better way to get a hold of them. Ask them to jump on a hangout. One of the things that we've noticed in a lot of our outreach in the last couple months is like, people are, a fun little stat that we discovered the other day, people are 10 times more likely to get on a hangout than they are to get on the phone, which I don't really know why, because like 1 of every 5 hangouts starts with, hey, can you hear me? Okay, hold on a sec, let me reset my camera. But people are way more likely to jump on hangouts. And that's a great way to get to know people, build bonds, build trust, etc.
I'd actually like to add on to this with an example from one of our clients. Sadly, I can't give their name. So one of the brands we worked with decided that they were going to do a brand community. So they launched the brand community. They were really happy. They got the promotion through the corporate website. And the first thing that happened when they launched their brand community is that the fan sites were mega pissed off that they weren't involved in this and started trolling the forums. That happened because they didn't reach out to them. They didn't communicate about them. They didn't say anything about it, and they just did it. And basically, the community felt that they were betrayed, which is really understandable. So the way they managed to pick it up was reach out to them and explain to them is like, we're not trying to do a competing website. We've got a different business objective, again. We're trying to achieve something different here, but we would like to cooperate with you. And what they did is they worked with them to create the whole content strategy. I wouldn't say that that is a best practice. I think that the best practice in this case is if you are trying to launch a forum for your brand and there are existing fans out there, reach out to them, get to know them, and get them involved before you launch it. It will avoid a lot of trolling and a lot of moderation pains.
Perfect. I'm actually going to piggyback on what you guys are talking about and pull up a question here that we had from Twitter. Hey, James, thanks for popping in. What kind of user research do you do first? We're sort of talking about this, but do you find a profession user research who can collect user needs? If you guys also want to jump in here, I was thinking too, like when you're doing this sort of user research, if you have any tools, anything like real, meat of it, tips and tricks that you guys have to be able to do any of this research that we're talking about?
Google. That's what I would use, Google. I would search, certainly search social media sites, looking for people talking about what it is you're going to build a community around. I guess you could use professional if it's really an archaic, or a very niche topic. You might want to use somebody pro to help you dig in, but generally people are going to be talking about it somewhere, and with the right keyword search, you'll be able to find it, especially if you tag the word forum or onto the end of it, whatever it is, forum.
I would say too, for the purposes of a community, you want people that are out there and talking. So you might not even want to go down the rabbit holes of obscure places to start with. And there's so many tools out there now for listening that anyone can easily get access to who's talking about it. You know.
I just want to say that was a better answer than mine.
No,
She beat me that time.
that wasn't. But
Yes,
I
it
did
was.
speak after you. I took the plunge.
If you're going international, analyze the culture of the country you're going into. Have a look at the different kind of behaviors. Again, I realize that I'm the only European person on this chat. I know that there are some differences in terms of culture and responses. Just make sure you don't go in there, especially if you go like Northern Europe. If you go to Switzerland, don't be all chummy. They will hate it. So just make sure you adapt to the culture you go to.
Okay, awesome. That's sweet. Sorry, I was kind of taken off guard. I was laughing at David in the chat. As you guys know, we have the chat going around. He said that he says notoriety different than Charlotte does. So even though I tend to prefer the way she says it, it's a lot cooler. Anyway, so question number, Trace. Who are some people that you can work with to help build your community? David, I know that you were mentioning some internal people. I think that that's a good way to go at. And what are some people? Anybody?
I think that there's already this really easy connection. I don't know if I just stole David's thunder or not. Sorry. All right, good. We're good. I don't know. Now I lost my train of thought, dang it. So I think there's always usually a pretty good connection depending on your company between community and product, or community and customer service, community and marketing, sometimes communities even in those departments. I think community is awesome as its own department. But if you can figure out how to plug that in a way to get those people internally to help you, if you can sell them on the idea like, hey, product guys, this is totally going to help your ideation strategy. Hey, marketing, this really helps you learn the behaviors of our users. It helps you understand how to better feed their needs and their value propositions and how you get people ticking. And customer service, this helps you decrease costs by X, Y, and Z. So if you can get those people involved internally to help really create this strong background, this backing for the community, so that you have that level of internal buy-in and that all hands on deck kind of attitude when you're launching a community, it definitely helps in the long run to make sure that you have a successful environment where the members really sense that the community is behind it and that they're going to help you have the experience that you want to have. Not sure if I answered that question correctly, but that's one answer.
It's good. Anybody else? Any other people you can think of?
I think
David,
it makes
you
sense.
want to completely wing it? Oh, Sean, go ahead.
I'm jumping in. I think it makes sense to. I mean, just like when you're going back to the original point of like the first 10 people that you bring on are the most difficult, and just like if you were trying to field like a soccer team, you would want to start recruiting people to serve specific needs. So if you have a bunch of people who are great, who are really passionate and have a lot of time and really want to like see it succeed and want to help you manage, that's awesome. But if you don't have somebody who's going to help with the content creation piece, it's a tree falling in the woods. So if you have somebody who's like, hey, I am not good at making content, I don't have a lot of time to do moderation, but I do really like just sharing things, and I have this huge following, and I know a guy who has an email list or whatever. Great, then there's your distribution channel. So I think kind of my recommendation is, especially when you're getting started, start looking for people to serve specific needs to help you in growing the community.
So I've got another story. I've realized that I'm answering all these questions with stories. In my previous company, so I was working in video games, a few months after we launched the community, so it was community/royalty program, where we asked people to register the games to actually make a link between the online and the offline. I didn't have enough budget to run my community properly, so I went to marketing with a shed load of data. I'm a data geek. Give me an Excel file and I'm really happy. And I went to marketing and said, did you know that that player or those players that play, for example, in the time it was Dark Souls, if we've got any gamers on listening, did you know that people that play Dark Souls also like those games and those games and those games? And we find that out because we've analyzed the data from the community. And the marketing team was so enthusiastic about it that actually helped build the relationship between the two teams and actually give some value to the community. So as of then, it helped us. I love the question of funding. What's that? Basically, we got more cash to do some things with the community. But we did that because we managed to prove the value, and data is very, very important. Behavioral data, usage data, content data, share it to anybody within the business to whom it's relevant, and that can always help with getting support.
Tell your stories as much as you want. Go right ahead. We like stories.
Yay!
And as Sherry said, that's actually part of a topic for next week. So, man, you're telling awesome stories. You're also setting us up. So that's sweet.
I didn't get paid for this.
Yeah, we're still working on that part of it. Anyway,
yeah, remember the whole what's funding thing?
So we have another question from Patrick. Thanks for the question, Patrick, who also just started the dang it count on Katie. So watch out, PG-13 rating. So now you guys can fire away if you want with some recommended listening tools. I know we've mentioned a couple. We said Google. Let's take this time to plug who you love and who do you use for listening before we start moving on to some more questions.
Okay, I'll go.
Well, I mean, I'll jump in and say, speaking of Google, if you've never used Google Alerts, you should look into it. I mean, it's a great tool because it'll tell you when something hits the web instantly.
Google Alerts are how I found out I kept getting impersonated on Twitter, actually.
That's the greatest story, by the way. In case people didn't know that, there was like a complete Sherry profile that was out there on Google, like profile picture and everything. It was so insane.
No, there's been like 50 of them now. I've shut them down at least 3 times now.
Well, I mean, to be fair to whoever that was, if I was going to be somebody else, I'd probably want to be Sherry.
That's not that flattering. They're bots. I use Hootsuite a lot to listen. I know Mention is really good for it as well. Obviously, you want to listen wherever like you're looking for people, so it kind of matters if you're looking across Twitter. Like, just keep in mind where you're searching. Maybe you're searching Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, wherever.
I discovered a new tool recently that I'll shout out because there's so many really good tools, and it's called Sales Prodigy, and I discovered it about a week or 2 ago, and it's actually, there's a mobile app, so I'll tweet out that handle. I'm poking around with it. It's pretty cool.
Also on Sales Prodigy's blog, I just saw this last night. You know, we have some CMGR Hangout regulars like Brian Fanzo and Rachel Miller, who got cartoonified as superheroes, and it's some of the coolest stuff that I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, so they're also actually a good case study in how to be original on the internet. So yeah, I'll tweet out that info.
I think one of my, I mean, everybody's sort of going to have their personal preference of tool, and I mean also sort of one of the other points of that is going to be like, what does your budget look like? Because in an ideal world, I would integrate everything across the board with like a full Radian 6 listening suite, and then move that into whatever I was building my platform on driving traffic to my place. But that's really expensive, and I don't think that most people who are building communities, who are building niche networks, who are connecting people around their passions have that ability. And I think really one of the things, again, like I've spent plenty of my career working in Silicon Valley, and I think one of the biggest things that Silicon Valley loves to do is freak out over which tool to use. And I think really all that is necessary is find a tool that serves like your minimum needs. Like I have tried just about everything else, and I keep falling back to TweetDeck and Google Alerts. And I think just go with those. Like, those are your tools. Done. Like, what's the next thing to do? What's the next problem to solve? And stop spending. I know this is a problem that I had for a very long time, which was trying to always find something better that checks every single one of my boxes, and it just doesn't exist. So I think just find the tools that get the job done, that's enough to get moving, and then just go.
I'm going to be that boring person. It's not only about the tools, it's also about the research. So I'm going to link a couple of sources in the chat and also on Twitter, so you can follow my Twitter handle. So the first one is a report created by an agency called We Are Social, and they do a report every year called the Digital, Social and Mobile Landscape. And that helps you understand a lot of the usage in the different countries you work in. So for example, at the moment I'm launching a community in South Africa and realized that only half of the population use the internet, but when they use the internet, they use it 5 times more than any other culture. So that is very important for us to know. And another source that is really interesting is the different cultural dimensions from a guy called Gert Hofstede, that I will link as well, which helps you again understand the cultural differences. So kind of research, so there's a tools for listening, but there's also the research that is important to do besides that.
Wonderful and awesome. So I'll just throw that one out there. Let's get question 4 going on here. And if any of you guys over there on Twitter are still upright and not drunk from your drinking game of Dutch metal band bingo, go ahead and send some more questions in. We have plenty of time here. But question 4, how do you separate yourself from being the community? How do you guys do that? And yeah, there you go.
Okay. I think that for me, it happens over time. So very early on in the community manager is very present, and because you're out there generating content, you're drumming up people to come to the community and control them into producing content for you. And then slowly over time, as the community grows, it starts to do that itself. And then, for me, a mile marker in development of a community is the day that the community generates more content than you do. So the day that they start more conversations and they generate more stuff. That's when you make that turn. And over time, I think slowly but surely, a community manager moves from being right out in front to pushing his community forward. One of my favorite quotes, and Dom loves this quote too, is that you build your reputation by helping others build theirs. And I think that's part of it, is that at first you have to set up the expectations in the community, and then as your community steps up, you push them forward and say, he did a great job, look what a great job he did, and as you celebrate those champions that you have, you can step further back, and your role changes one from production into more of management, true management, and maybe setting the direction and those kinds of things. But it's, to me, I just do it naturally over time. It just feels that way for me. So in a community that I've been in for a long time, you might not really know I'm there until you do something wrong and I tap you on the shoulder and say, you can't do that here.
I have a really bad analogy for this question. The way I see it in sort of an offline community perspective is that we're kind of like the politicians that a community elects, because it doesn't matter even if you are a part of that community, and that's why you're eligible to be on this role. The whole concept behind what a politician is actually supposed to be is that they're supposed to, advocate on behalf of what the people that they represent want. And that's really our job, separately from thinking of our own interests as, a minority in the whole scheme of things, and not actually being the true owners of the community, is to make sure that we realize our role is a step bigger. So we are a representative of the people in the community rather than just one person in the community. So I don't know if that came across the way I meant it to. It's probably still a really bad analogy, but I think that's really the separation, is that we are part of the community to some extent, especially if it's a topic you're passionate about and you know a lot about it, and you started out as maybe a community member and moved into the manager role, but you really have to put yourself aside and make sure that you are part of the voice of the community for the majority.
Wonderful. Wunderbar. If nobody else has anything for this one, I'm going to pull in another question from the Twitters. Thank you very much to Steven for joining us. Question for the panel. Curious if anyone is using conversion pixels for community growth and how you are overcoming ad blockers. I'm going to favor that on the air and then let you guys answer that question.
Why are you advertising to your community? That's the question. What is the purpose of it? You know, communities tend to not like being marketed to, unless it's really, really appropriate. But I mean, that's the big question: is why? Why are you advertising to your community? And then as far as overcoming it, there's tools out there that for every ad blocker, there's a kind of a counter to it that puts up ads that say, hey, we noticed you're using ad blocker, you know, help support the site. Please unblock us. I don't know what those run or how they're used, but I know they're out there.
I have no experience with the ad blocker issue, just based on where the communities are that I'm involved with. I haven't had to deal with that.
Perfect. Well, Stephen, if you want to, I heard that David asked why, so if you want to continue that conversation, go ahead and tag him at Historian. You guys can have that. You don't get the deep resonance of his voice on Twitter, but you can imagine it. With that, I'm going to pull in another question here from Mary. And just so everybody knows how much of an all-star Kristen Cardos is, she threw this question in here, and she's doing research at the same time because she's sweet. So let's share this question from Mary. This is one of my favorite ones, and I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about it. Building a community, whether from scratch or not, is time-consuming. Preach. How do you turn off and take time to rebuild yourself? What do you guys say? I want to hear what everybody has to say on this one. This will be everybody answer the question.
For me, a long time ago, I ended up getting a divorce. So that was a reality check. I just got too invested in my community. It wasn't just that. I don't want to blame it all on the community, but for me, it was just, you know, realizing that it was taking too much of my time and taking away from my family. So, you know, sometimes it's the hard knocks that wake you up.
Community management is a 150% job, and it does drain you emotionally. I actually don't manage communities myself anymore, so I'm a consultant in that, so I help people do it. I get one of my clients, I'd say about twice a month, I get clients calling me crying because they're just really attached to the community. So in regards of tips and to not be too emotionally attached, I would say that I don't really have any, because I think being emotionally attached to your community and actually being human and being involved is also part of what makes you a good community manager. But don't let it completely eat your life. The community manager I used to work with in the previous video games company, he was actually very transparent to his community and said, guys, I'm allowed a weekend as much as you are. If you can't accept that, I'm really sorry. And he was very transparent about it. So you are human, and just be honest about it.
Yeah, I think it's important to take that time for yourself. There's a quote I like to quote from Natalia. She's at Google. She used to be the Google Plus community manager, and now is working with a women's group. But she pointed out to me that if you don't take time for yourself, then you can't take time for your community. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not who you need to be for your community. And that really struck home to me. And so I take the time to go running, to go hiking, to go biking, things like that just help me get fresh air and step away from technology and reset my brain to be who I need to be, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's not one size fits all as far as what you actually need in order to recharge or get your break in. But I think if you try to early on figure out what that is, whether it's like Sherry was saying, going outdoors, or needing an hour or two off or whatever, figure out what your need is, and then just try to be rigid about it. Try to make it as a part of your routine the way other deadlines and tasks are. That's what I try to do. I fail a lot, but I try.
And I think one of the other points that, like, why this question, like, this is another question that I hear a lot, which is like, and it's something that comes up a lot in community management, if for no other reason, that the art of community management is so incredibly personal. So, like, a work-life balance in and of itself is just sort of an inherently difficult problem to solve. But then when, like, your work is interacting with other humans on a really personal level, and you're talking about emotions and feelings, and depending on what your community is about, like, these things could be about someone's livelihood. If you're managing a community of Etsy storefront owners or Shapeways 3D printing designers, like, if you're running one of those communities, then I mean, you could very well be talking to people about their livelihood, and if something goes wrong, the sort of the crisis management that you're dealing with is not like, oh, hey, I can't log in, my password doesn't work. It's like, dude, I didn't get paid, and this is how I make rent. And so the inherently, like, personal nature of community management, I think, really wears down a lot of people. And I think that's also what, to everybody else's points, like, it really becomes like a really strong exercise in work-life balance, where you just sort of need to set hard guidelines on things like, I'm going to work out 5 days a week, and that's that. And, like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the dog for a walk every day. I'm not going to check my phone while we're at the dinner table. Like, whatever those guidelines are, I think it is super important, just because, like, what we work on is so personal. You interact with people on such a deeply personal level.
Yeah, I agree. I think that figuring out what those, the more that you manage communities, I think something that you learn, or maybe I've learned, because like Charlotte, I moved from the management space to the consultancy space, is that you have to draw lines as far as what your needs to do, what need to do's are, and what your want to do's are. And I think that's really the separation. An example that Sean made me think of was the fact that, I've had community members contact me in the middle of the night that are in Australia that need something, deleted, that they posted right away because they're going to lose their jobs over it, and it's really, imminent on their livelihood, that I address them and help them right now, even though, there's a 16-hour time difference and they need that addressed. So I think that you need to figure out what your special considerations are, but other than that, really figure out, okay, these are my hours, this is how I separate this. Personally, I'm probably an oddity in this world, in this industry, but I don't really use personal social media or online communities in a personal capacity anymore, because I'm doing it 50 hours a week, with 15 other communities with the people that I help consult. So I feel like, as much as you feel like other people are depending on you, you need to realize that you still need to depend on yourself to be able to take care of yourself, to be there for those people that will have those situations that are going to be much more dire in the special circumstances.
And I think that that's something that we sort of see every single week, is that idea of setting expectations in whatever way you really do, and we set expectations in our community. We have community guidelines that we put, in forums, in Facebook groups, everywhere. Keep that, use that, and do it for yourself. Set that expectation. There's always exceptions to the rule. There's always that time where you get a text from a community member and you handle something that you shouldn't have to worry about. You step outside of a dinner, but it's the point of not making that a habit. That's what makes I think that's, personally, when I look at it, that's what makes a good community manager great. A good community manager can keep their hours and not do those special things. A great one does do those every so often, but if you want to be happy and be a community manager long term, rather than 9 months and hate yourself, you sort of have to set that kind of stuff up. Okay, cool. So we have.
Before we move on, before I just want
okay, go ahead.
Show of hands, everybody. How many people have burned out in a community? as a community manager? How many of you just burned yourself out in a community?
We can see
Yeah,
the
I know I have.
consultants there. It's like, I like community management, I don't want to do it anymore.
Back to you,
I
Dom.
think one thing that's really important with that, I'm going to call it rule number 2, is never ever answer angry or upset, because you'll say things that you regret. Because we all know that rule number 1 is don't be a dick, because as a community manager, when you're a dick, it's even worse. But rule number 2, never answer angry.
All right, if you're playing Don't Be a Dick Bingo, drink, and we'll pull in another question here. This one actually, let's see, I am all sorts of in different windows here, so let me read it. James, who by far is the nicest person asking questions, adding please on everything. Thanks a lot, James, for the second question. One more, you got Patrick, buddy. Have you ever tried and failed to start a new community, and what have you learned as a community manager? So I'm sure we've all failed at something, so if you want to shout out some quick stories here, feel free.
Am I going to jump on the failure grenade first? All right, deal. So we've launched thousands and thousands and thousands of communities, and so we've very obviously had a couple of them just explode. So one of I think the reoccurring theme in failed communities is that we tried to force authenticity. So we went in and tried to build a community to like wrap our arms around something, but we weren't part of that community and we didn't have like the authenticity to speak to them. Whereas some of ours that were the most successful were things that we built out of that community. So it was a content creator who wanted to build a tighter relationship, and so that person already had an authentic voice in that community, and then we recruited more people to help them out and did this sort of a high tide raises all ships approach, which worked tremendously well. And then sort of one of the other ways that we've failed is by going out and not thinking about how we were going to handle distribution. So if we went to build a community about whatever, and the only people who were ever interested had no way to reach other people, did not have the, I don't want to say motivation, but like the determination, if you will, to go out and like really shake trees and try and find more people, to help you out. I think the not decision and being inauthentic in your approach are the two biggest absolute landmines to a community succeeding.
I will say this, and it's a favorite quote of mine. I don't fail. I either succeed or I learn something. That said, in reality, I think that in every community you will have failures. Either it's going to fail to start, fail to launch, you're going to get going along and screw up. There's going to be a failure at some point. It's just you can't focus on the failure. You have to focus on the lesson, focus on what you can learn, and move forward. It's going to happen. You're going to screw it up. I've done it. If you Google, you can see. If you Google David Historian DeWalt, you will find at least 1 or 2 blog posts from when I used to manage gaming communities where they've railed against me as a horrible, awful community manager. And maybe at the time I was. I don't think I was. I feel I was in the right, but it was their perception that I was doing things wrong, and of course they could do them better. But you just have to take those lessons. Maybe I didn't communicate well. Maybe because they were in a foreign country and English wasn't their first language, maybe there was a language barrier problem. But you're going to mess up. You're going to fail. Just accept it and take the lessons learned and moved on. Just you got to go with it. You got to take the lessons learned.
Okay. I don't want to take away from anybody's failure stories, but we do have 2 questions left, and it sort of rolls right into this when we're talking about learning lessons. What challenges do you face, if you guys have sort of experienced this? This is a great problem to have. But when your community starts to scale, what are some challenges that you have when it starts to get bigger? And how can these be avoided in the early stages?
I think that one of the biggest challenges that happens when a community really starts to grow, starts to scale, is that the community manager can be overwhelmed with things to do. So making sure that as a community manager you plan for those times when one person isn't enough. And sometimes you're going to have to deal with the fact that there's no money to add somebody on board. So you have to either turn to your community and say who wants to volunteer to help, or you have to turn internally to your company if that's a possibility and say who internally wants to step up and help me with this, and manage a small section of the community that maybe applies to them. So dealing with those kinds of challenges where it just gets too big for one person to manage. I don't think you can avoid that. Your best problem is your worst problem. If you have an app and it suddenly becomes wildly popular and it grows extremely fast, you're going to be overwhelmed, and it's going to be hard to keep up with unless you figure out ways to help manage that. So it's just, that's one of the challenges anyway.
I think David kind of nailed that question on the head for the most part. The only thing I'd add to that is figure out ways to maybe do better process automation. I think there are always opportunities and new ways to think about how you go about doing certain tactics that help build and engage communities. So you know that when you start out with a brand new community, you're doing a lot of very micro level tasks that are very one-off direct conversations. And I think that you need to figure out how to transition that into something that's more macro level. So how can you go about segmenting your audience better, for example, so that you could target many people as far as specific needs or interests that they have in your community and get them to engage versus one person at a time. That's just one thought. Or feedback channels, how can you make sure that you figure out a way to automate that better by looking at new technologies if you can't scale people. But as David mentioned, of course, going out and creating volunteer programs are a great solution to that as well.
I mean, I think one of the, so there's sort of two sides to the question, right? But the same question is really like, as a community gets bigger, how do you scale the moderation cost, right? I mean, is really the core question. So I think that there's sort of two ways to look at it. One is it's worth noting that I have it doodled somewhere on my desk, but I'm not going to be able to find it just because I do have it. So when you're building a community, they sort of grow like this, right? Where they'll come out and the conversation will branch, and then it'll come back, and then it'll do this sort of a thing, and then it'll come back in, and whatever else. So it's one thing to know that communities are going to ebb and flow, and it's okay, and you need to allow and let them grow kind of tangentially. Like they do need to do that, and that's important. But it's also super important to, from very early on, set a strong precedent that moderation is important, and that if you step out of line, your post will get torn down, it'll get like archived depending on the tool that you're using, whatever, or you'll get suspended if you break the rules, right? But we have seen over and over and over again in the communities that grow and get really, really big, and then we try to start moderating them. It is a huge failure in doing that, and we run into this huge problem of like user revolt, where everybody's like, whoa, all of a sudden now you're moderating us. As opposed to the communities that we moderate strongly from the start, and as they grow, we continue to moderate them super strongly all the way through. Then it's super clear as to what's allowed, what's not. I'm going to say awesome one more time just because somebody made a bot that keeps counting how many times I say it. But if you keep going and keep setting a precedent of these are the rules, these are the way that things are supposed to work, people know what to expect, they know how to behave, and it becomes just a really good, healthy environment.
What Sean said, I agree.
There we go. He wanted his mic drop, and I'm pretty sure that he just got it.
Please just pull out your earphones and leave in a fantastic exit or something, just for me, please.
He flips his desk.
Basically, she's just trying to get rid of you.
I would not do that.
By the way, that's not a bot that's counting awesome. There are real people that are behind that. So, yeah, that's what happens there.
Shout out to the awesome count. I just broke double digits.
There you go. Nice work. There's a plaque somewhere. Somewhere you'll get a plaque.
But
But yeah.
total awesome
wait, go
count
ahead.
is 10 for the hour. That's ridiculous. Step it up, guys. Step it up.
Mediocre. I think it's just my awesome count.
Yeah, I think my awesome is close to double digits too. So we're doing good. Even without Brew here, who is literally the director of Awesome, we're doing pretty well. So we have like literally 120 seconds left. So does anybody have any quick last words? Anybody else want to get a mic drop in there before we sign off?
I just want to say the awesome group that we've awesomely been with today is been completely awesome in their answers, and to squeeze in a few more awesomes and make sure that I come up top on the awesome list, I'm just going to awesomely continue talking for as
No, I'm
awesome a
interrupting
long
you.
time as I
I'm
possibly
interrupting.
can.
I want to quote Charlotte
That's
and
awesome.
remind
It's
everybody.
awesome that you're interrupting.
I want to remind everybody what Charlotte said. Don't be a dick. If we have one takeaway, can we please, everybody, that would be
I
awesome.
like how Kristen
That's
has
awesome.
gone from being afraid to follow David to just straight up interrupting
Okay,
him.
yeah.
It's perfect. It's great.
I have to
wonderful.
say that also you're, again, mostly American. The English way of saying it is awesome.
Awesome.
All right, that's the
Awesome.
last one of those words because we're not going to be able to top that one. Thanks everybody for being here. If I did mention it earlier, if you want to be a part of a panel that is as awesome as this one, feel free to go to my CMGR. There's a participate link. Click on that. And next week, just because I love throwing it to Sherry, what are we talking about next week there, Miss Sherry?
Next week we're talking about storytelling as a community skill with Brian, Isabel, Barack, and mind blank. Someone help me out here. I tweeted it and then I lost it. Jessica Malnick. It'll be good times.
It's going to be sweet. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for joining. If you have any questions, feel free to tweet at the panel. But we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Bye.